That's a direct order. Do it now.
Hi guys, Happy New Year to you all. If you watched my recent videos, you know that I was lucky enough to get sent the Featherlight 190, which was a 136 gram 5-inch quad running 1407 Cobra 3200 kV motors. And I was really excited about that. I took it out and flew it, crashed it a lot, and on the second flight I basically broke one of the arms. And looking back and having gone through my DVR footage of the first flight, as I said in the comments, I'm pretty sure that I fractured the arm in an earlier crash where I had a full speed bang into the ground. Just to let you know, the frame that you can actually buy is slightly updated from the one that I was using, and it has more meat around where the arms connect to the base of the frame, and it also has stronger motor mounts. So sort of read too much into the fact that I broke mine. I think it's a really good frame and I really enjoyed flying it. But anyway, I broke mine and I kind of scratched my head for a little bit and wondered what I was going to do with the motors, which I really liked. And I think probably what I'll do with those motors, given they're a relatively low kV at 3200 for a 1407, I'll probably make a 3 or 4 inch sort of freestyle quad with those. But there are some parts about the frame that I really liked, and one of them was the TPU mount, which weighed 4 grams with the aluminium standoff and screws, and 3 grams without. And I kind of got to thinking about sort of making another super light quad, another 5-inch quad, and this one wouldn't be about getting under the 250 gram threshold with a battery. It would basically be about seeing how light I could build a 5-inch race quad. What I've come up with is what you see below, which is kind of a combination of 2 frames and some bits and bobs that I had already. So quite a while ago I reviewed the Thug Super Flea, which was a really lightweight frame, 44 grams, and it was designed to run the Runcam Split, which at the time had just come out. And I gave that frame a bit of a panning, simply because there's a lot of things that I didn't like about it, namely the actual Runcam Split pod part. I felt was much too heavy and much too cumbersome. The top plate was 1mm, etc. So anyway, I never built that frame and it just sat around. So what I've done is I've basically taken the arms and the base plate and centre plate from the Thug Super Flea and combined that with the camera mount from the Aeronaut Featherlight. So what we've basically got here is an incredibly light 5-inch race quad. So if I just show you on the scales, I don't know if you can see, but as it stands at the moment it weighs 160 grams, which when you compare it to most 5-inch light race quads, they would generally come in a light one at around 240 grams. So basically this quad is 30% lighter than most of its super light racing brethren. And this was kind of an experiment that I wanted to make. That 160 grams is with a LiPo strap, which is added on 3 or 4 grams, but of course there's no props on at the moment, so you're going to add on 12 to 15 grams in weight for some props, but that still makes it 175 grams sort of top, which is stupidly light, and I'm really curious to see how this will fly. The motors I've used before, but I burnt one out, but I got a replacement, and these motors are really smooth, and on a much heavier quad I had tons of agility, but I was missing out a little bit on top end, and I never got to try different prop combinations to see if I could change that, because as I said, I smoked the motor. But basically this build is, as I said, you've got the Thug Superfleet bottom, which basically comprises of 3mm arms and a 1mm bottom plate, and these arms are removable, and sandwiching those you've got a 1mm top plate. Now this frame has some design ideas which I really liked at the time. These arms basically slot in, so these arms kind of widen out here, and where you can see this line of screws, there is basically a cutout, and that allows basically the arm to be removed by simply loosening the screws, and it will slide straight out, so it's really easy to replace the arm. Now you'll notice at the moment that the arms are held in place by a titanium screw and a nylon screw, and on the other side, if you can see, you've got an M3 aluminium nylock nut, and the other nylon nut runs straight through up into the camera plate. Now I could have used another metal screw here, but on the original frame, after testing, what Thug said is that they tended to use one metal screw and a nylon screw, and the reason for that is the arms on this particular frame meet in the middle, and there's a little bit of play there. And what they said is, in a bad crash where you would usually break an arm, instead of breaking the arm, the nylon nut would basically snap, and that would give the arm enough of a tiny bit of rotation to stop it from breaking. And I never tested that, as I said, because I never built this frame, but I've built it in that same configuration because I think if that works, it's a nifty idea, because I'd much rather lose, you know, a cheap nylon screw than I would either breaking the bottom plate or the arm itself. But clearly, as this has got replaceable arms, you can simply get some new arms if you wish to do so. At the moment it's running 2 screws, and it will be running 3 screws, but as I said when I originally designed this frame, the motor mounts holes are 16 by 19, and the mounting holes for the Hyperlite 2204's 2722 kV, which you see here, are 16 by 16. So what I need to do is just file out a little tiny millimetre from there, and I'll run this with 3 screws in it. But the build itself has come out really nicely. I'm pretty happy with it. When I originally reviewed the Aeronaut FPV Featherlight, I kind of wondered at the time, he'd used an Airbot Asgard, which is a pretty big all-in-one flight controller and 24 amp ESCs, and that used a 30.5mm stack, and I kind of wondered at the time whether you could get in a 20mm stack and whether that would be lighter. So that's exactly what I've done here. So basically what we've got here is, at the bottom I've got a 20 by 20mm SpeedX 20 amp 4-in-1 ESC, and above that I've got a 20 by 20 Omnibus F4 with Betaflight OSD and a 3 amp voltage regulator with LC filter. On top of that I've got a little XM Plus receiver, and sat on top of that I've got the good old VTX 03, which is a really lightweight little 25 or 200 MW VTX, and again I'm using my favoured Demonrc antenna, simply because these give pretty good reception and they don't break. And on the front I've got a Runcam Sparrow, and as you can see we've got pretty good camera protection. The one slight thing I had to do on this, which I didn't want to do, is because what I usually do when I'm running a really tight stack like this on a 20 by 20 mil build, is if the frame has a lipo strap cutout, I run this lipo strap through and under and back out again, and what that allows me to do is mount the ESC on 3M foam tape and then basically screw upwards into the flight controller. And I like to do that for 2 reasons. One, it gives me a lower stack, and 2, when you run in such small components, the benefit of soft mounting is really questionable, and I wonder, given the weight of the the weight of the wires, etc., whether soft mounting is really doing anything at all. And by running or by sitting the ESC on top of 3M foam tape, I think what it's doing is it filters out some high frequency noise, and because it's being filtered out at source, obviously it's not rising up to your flight controller. So I couldn't do this, so basically what I've done is just used M2 screws, an N2 nut, and then I've just sat 2 soft mounts, screw upwards, another soft mount, and then a little nut on top. It's worked out to be quite a kind of simple, clean build. Obviously there's a bit of wiring on the other side, but there's nothing you can really do about that. But the reason why I built this is really for a few reasons. When I use these Hyperlite motors on my Zero S5M split edition, I absolutely loved them. The quad was so agile. I can't remember the weight of that quad, but it was a lot heavier than this one. And I've kind of got a few things going around in my head that I want to sort of think about. Generally with motors like this, 224s, you would run lightweight props. So, you know, generally a 504 tri-blade, or maybe some HQ 4.3 V1S, or potentially bi-blades, so 504 or 5045 bi-blades, because clearly, as they're relatively small motors, they don't have a huge amount of torque to drive big heavy props. Now there's something going around in my head, and this is the reason why I'm kind of curious about this, is the lighter that you build the quad, the greater the amount of prop unloading you get. So if you kind of look at motor testing, and they push those motors to the limit to see how much power they have on any given props, you're not really seeing a true reflection of a motor's ability, or you're only seeing it based on, you know, a set of artificial circumstances that you couldn't replicate in real life. And in real life, if you have a really heavy quad and you put props on it, the weight of that quad is constantly loading the props. Obviously at some points that will lessen as you're dropping, and as you're the weight, the momentum of the quad is carrying it forward, etc. But the lighter you get, the more unloading you get. And I wonder whether on a typical 230, 240, 250 gram build, you would run 504Os, etc. I wonder, because this quad is a good 30% lighter than any of its super light brothers, whether I'll be able to run much higher pitch props. So what I kind of need to do is find some really lightweight but pitch heavy props, maybe 5048s or 504 or 5050, and I wonder whether the extreme lightness of the quad will counteract the heavy pitch, and it might actually run really well. So I've got some DAL dual blade Cyclones, the 5050. I've got some HQ V1S, I've got my standard GEP RC 504Os, which is a freestyle prop that I really like, and I've got some dual blades. And I kind of want to use this quad as a bit of a test bench to see what I can get out of it, because given the absolutely amazing agility that I found using these motors before, I kind of suspect on a quad this light I might be in for something really special. I mean, I might be completely wrong, but because it's so light, I'm going to be able to use a really light battery. In terms of batteries, I'm probably going to be able to run this, in fact I can run this on 850 more batteries, which of course are light and also pretty cheap. And the reason why I know that is because I ran its predecessor on 850 more batteries, and I was still getting 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes flight time mooching around. Clearly, if I want to add a bit of weight on, I can jump up to 1,000 more. But the other thing that's in the back of my mind is I've been looking at some batteries on Electric Wingman, Air Jewels batteries, and their 850 more 4S LiPo 75C weighs 88 grams, which is a good 20 grams or 15 grams lighter than most 850 more batteries, and that tends to mean that it's a crap battery. But On Adam Featherstone's channel, who was the guy who originally built the Featherlight quad, he obviously saw the same batteries and bought some for testing, and his thoughts were, I asked him the question, his thoughts were the batteries were better than the Nanortecs, which I've found to be pretty good batteries actually and really cheap, better than the Tattoo 75C 850 more, which I've got as well, and I'm not hugely impressed with. They're pretty good, but my favourite battery in terms of 850 more is the Demonrc Graphene, which is a really good battery with little sag in 850 more, but it weighs 112 grams, so it's really heavy. So the fact that these air duals sort of sit at the top end of battery performance but weigh 88 grams is something that's really exciting. They do come with an XT30 connector, but on a quad like this I could run an XT30 connector if I wanted to do so. And while we're talking about this, the reason why this is using 20 amp ESCs is simply that these motors don't put out a huge amount of amps, and the SpeedX ESC is rated at 20 amps with a 10-second 25 amp burst. Now there's no way this quad is going to put out 100 amps, and there's no way a battery like this of this size will generate 100 amps. It'll probably top out at about 70 amps, I would imagine, max. So we shouldn't have any issues with ESCs. So the whole thing should work really well together. The motors themselves weigh 20 grams with short wires, even though we've got 3mm arms. Thug Carbon has a reputation of being some of the best, and it doesn't tend to break. And having looked at it, I suspect the reason why is it looks like really good carbon, and it also has a tiny little bit of flex. And the more quads I build and the more quads I crash and the more quads I break, I think absolute stiffness in a quad or in carbon fibre is probably not such a great thing. You want a tiny little bit of flex, simply because if it becomes too stiff it will just splinter and crack. In fact, the Avant frames that I fly, the only one that I ever broke, which was the Leggero S5, because there's the tiniest little bit of flex, what actually happens is they don't kind of snap and fall off. What tends to happen, or it did in this case, is the carbon basically just, the top part splintered and it kind of bent down a little bit, but all I needed to do is essentially just vice it and glue it, and I could use it, you know, for weeks until a new part arrived. So really looking forward to playing around with this. You're probably not going to see any footage you know, in the next few days, and the reason why for that is the weather is awful at the moment. We've got ridiculous winds, ridiculous rain, flooding. It's just a bit of a nightmare to fly, and I don't want to end up crashing and ruining this. I want to use this as a bit of a test bed. I've got a little bit of extra work to do on it. I need to shorten this antenna because it's sticking up too far, and in a crash I'll probably hit my props, so that needs to be readjusted. And I also need to remap the motors in beta flight, because although the Omnibus F4 and the SpeedX ESC simply slot together with this little 5-pin connector, the motor outputs are different, so I just need to remap those in beta flight, which won't take long. In terms of these components, by the way, the flight controller weighs about 4 grams and the ESC I think is about 5 grams, so it's a fair bit lighter than the Airbot Asgard that was in the Featherlight quad. However, the downside is obviously I've had to use additional mounting inside, but I still suspect it's quite a bit lighter. In fact it is, because given this this whole quad weighs 160 grams and the Featherlight weighed 136 grams. Well, these motors are 4 grams heavier, so there's 16 grams straight away. So, and the frame itself is slightly heavier, so I've clearly shaved quite a little bit of weight off Adam's Featherlight build. in terms of the individual components themselves. So yeah, really excited to see how this flies. I hope it's going to be something really special. So yeah, stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and let's see how this guy goes. But yeah, big hopes, and I think it looks, the dogs do dies. So yeah, happy flying. Cheers guys, thanks, bye bye.